Hey folks, Quilly18 here, and welcome to a new sort of mini tutorial series in Unity. This came to me kind of originally as a joke. One of the things I do, of course, on my regular channel, Quilly18, is play video games, and specifically, I play a lot of Civilization, and one of the things I do when I play Civilization 6 is complain about the fact that there was a lack of an alert when a city has an enemy within its bombardment range. So it's very easy to miss the fact that your city could have taken a shot at someone. And I found that very frustrating because it was present in Civ 5, and it seems like the sort of thing that should be in Civ 6. And I kind of thought as a joke that I might do like, oh, I'll do a video teaching, Syraxis how to do the alert. And I'm like, wait. This actually ties in very well with a lot of questions I get quite often in terms of both user interface elements and ways to trigger certain behaviors when things happen in the game. So I thought, you know what, this is going to be a great little self-contained tutorial, probably something like 3, 4, maybe 5 episodes, something like that. We'll see how it goes, depending on how long I talk and, how long it takes to explain certain things. Probably more in the 4 to 5 episode range over here, where we're going to create a alert system that shows up when certain things happen in a game. We will have little alerts that pop up over here that you can then dismiss and get rid of. And we're going to show easy way to tie in various events that can happen in your game to have them trigger an alert in a very nice, sort of nice kind of global way, easy to just set things off without having to do too much work to make the system work forward. I will note that something very similar to this is actually not a bad way to do achievements either, which is something that we could discuss as maybe either a follow-up tutorial or an extension to this one. We'll see how that goes. But for right now, I'm just going to focus on the alert system. So one of the big things we're going to do is we are going to work on sort of user interface stuff to make that look real nice. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to contrive sort of a situation that we can use as sort of a trigger for spawning an event of some kind. We can even have like a few extra dummy things, maybe even some buttons that just fire off a dummy event, which might not be a terrible idea. Now, what I was going to do is set up an initial little scene over here for us to play with. I was going to make a couple of objects in Blender, put them in the scene, and sort of set things up. And because that's not related to the main point of the tutorial, but people often ask that I do a few more videos showing a little bit more Blender stuff. And so what I decided to do, this first episode is going to deal exclusively with setting up this initial scene, doing a little bit of Blender work, and then importing it into here. It is not going to involve any user interface stuff, and the only programming that might happen will be related to our little test scene to set up the initial dummy environment. So if you're only interested in the user interface side of things and triggering these sort of alerts, you can skip to part 2. But otherwise, in part 1 here, we will include this Blender work and things like that, because people do ask for that from time to time. So what I want to do is I want to go into Blender over here. So Blender, of course, 3D modeling software. And what I want to do is I want to set up a couple of objects. Actually, I think it's 3 objects in here. One, I'm going to set up a little hexagon tile that will be used as the hexes. Again, that sort of civilization look of things. We're going to set up a unit of some kind. I think I'm going to make something that looks like a meeple from board games. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's fine. Just like a little wooden person, little pawn kind of thing. And I guess the third thing will be a little model for like our city or something. Maybe I'll make like a castle. So very, very, very simple models, but you can actually get a lot of work done with something like this. So if you were to start in Blender and you were to start from a new scene, what would happen? I guess I could do that. Normally, by default, when you start a new scene in Blender, you will probably get this kind of setup over here. A camera, a light, and initial cube. You can right-click on things to select them. The best thing to do to start off with, though, is we're going to hit the A key. First time you hit the A key, normally it deselects anything. If you hit it again, it selects all. You can keep sort of whacking that A key to cycle between them. Very useful to verify what you have selected. So anything in orange is selected. I'm then going to hit X to delete, and I'm going to say, yep, go ahead and delete it. So we've got a nice, fresh, empty scene over here. Now, if I want to have a hexagon tile in the middle, the easiest way to do this, I would say, is to add a cylinder that's only got 6 sides. So not really much of a cylinder at all, but it should be the perfect way to do that. So if you hit Shift-A. So I realize there are a lot of hotkeys in Blender. Now, there is the menu over here on the left you can go to. So you can go to the Create menu and hit Cylinder over here. That's perfectly fine. Okay, Create Cylinder, that's okay. There's a lot of different buttons over here. But one of the things that is very important in basically all 3D programs to be able to work at sort of a reasonable rate is you are ultimately going to have to learn those hotkeys. And Shift-A is not too bad for adding an object. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a cylinder. Then without doing anything else, there is this add cylinder pop-up that comes down in the bottom right corner over here, and this allows you to tune some of the settings in the cylinder. If you've deselected the cylinder or done something else, you will no longer be able to tweak the values of your existing cylinder. This is only while you're still kind of in the add mode. So what I want to do is I want to change the number of vertices, to 6. This will give us a nice hexagon shape, right? By the way, you can use the middle mouse button to sort of orbit around the focal point in your editor window over here. So middle mouse button lets you sort of pan around here. And yeah, that looks like a hexagon, which is good. The radius. Now, of course, we can always scale things once we move into Unity, but it will make your life a lot easier if your object is scaled the way that you want within Blender itself, so that your model is, you know, the correct 1-to-1 ratio. Now, this starts with a cylinder that's got a radius of 1. So from the middle out to each one of these points, it has a radius of 1. I think what would be better, so in fact has a width of 2. I think for our purposes, it'll be a little easier if the radius is set to 0.5. So thus the diameter, or the full width of this, is going to be 1. So 1 unit in Unity space. That way, you know, 1 hex per Unity space seems pretty useful to work with. And then in terms of the depth, I think we can, it's sort of an arbitrary thing we can set here. I think I'm going to go to something like 0.2. That seems fine. I mean, the depth won't really matter that much. In fact, you kind of sort of don't need all the geometry here, but I think this will look nice for what we're going to set up. Okay, so I've got my default cylinder. I'm pretty happy with that. One thing to consider, by the way, you can use on the numpad, 7 goes to your top view, 1 goes to your front view, 3 goes to your side view. If you are on a laptop without a numpad, I gotta say, navigating Blender becomes a lot more annoying. I actually got a little USB numpad that I can plug into my laptop. When I'm doing Blender work on the road, I plug my numpad into my laptop so that I can work on that. Although if you're lucky enough to have a laptop with a numpad, then you should be set up. So that's a very nice way to navigate around with 7, 1, and 3. Then technically you can use 4 and 6 to sort of orbit around this way, and 8 and 2 to orbit around this way. Very rarely do I use that personally. Okay, so we've got the cylinder in here, but one of the things to consider is, do we want the cylinder to poke down in the bottom? Now you'll notice it looks a little bit like flared out over here. It looks like, quite clearly, especially as we zoom in here with the mouse wheel, this bit is higher up than that bit. Why is it? Because we're in perspective mode over here. I don't tend to like to do the editing in perspective mode. I prefer to edit in orthogonal or orthographic mode. So if you hit the 5 key on the numpad, then now you're in orthographic mode, and so you've got these straight lines. Perspective gets all shot, but it's much, much, much easier, I find, to do the editing. So, do we want this? Where do we want the 0 point, right? If you're talking about, now, in Blender, the Z-axis is vertical. Of course, in Unity, the Y-axis is vertical. But, so, when you get this into Unity, when this object is set to a Y of 0, do you want it to be sticking down partially or not? You may, and I think for our purposes, actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it down. The idea being, I want any object that sits on this tile, I want the object on the tile, when it's set to a Y of 0, I want it to be perfectly level with the top of this hex. As such, what I'm going to do is, with this object selected, again, you can hit A to deselect everything, A again to select everything, which in this case is only one object, or you can deselect everything and just right-click on this object. It will have that orange border when it's selected. With it selected, you can hit Tab. We are now in edit mode, okay? By going into edit mode, we can change the actual vertices now. I can deselect everything, grab a vertice. If I hit the G key for sort of grabs the move, I can start stretching this thing all over the place. I'm just going to hit Escape to get out of there, and I'm just going to reselect everything over here. So what we're doing here is we're moving the individual vertices. It's important that we're not moving the object. We're moving the individual vertices. So I'm going to hit the G key at this point to grab everything. But instead of moving it manually, what I'm going to do is type in, I'm going to hit Z. So now I'm only moving it on the Z axis. And what I really want to do is move it so it's flush here. Now in the bottom left corner of the screen, you can see some numbers over there. And you can see that when it's sort of around here, we're almost at negative 0.01, or sorry, 0.1. And of course that makes sense because we told the depth of the cylinder to be 0.2, which meant it was sticking above 0 by 0.1 and below 0 by 0.1. So if we move it down by exactly negative 0.1, the top of this should be flush with the sort of 0 of our coordinate system. Now, rather than trying to do this manually, what you can do is you can type it in. Now that we've hit the Z to say we want to move along the Z, we can actually type minus 0.1 and then hit enter. And we've moved it exactly. So the top of this object is exactly level with our 0 in the coordinate system over here. Now, it's worth noting, one thing you can do, if you left click anywhere, what you're going to do is you're going to move the 3D cursor, which is fine. The 3D cursor just controls things like where a new object will spawn. So let's say I click it over here, and then just I add a cube, the cube will spawn over there, for example. But I'm going to go ahead and undo that. What's more important is that each object, okay, especially if I tab out and go back into object mode, it becomes a little cleaner and a little less messy. Each object has an origin point. This little yellow dot over here, when this object is selected, and you can actually see the transform over here by default, this is the object's origin. So when we place this in Unity, whatever coordinate, when you're typing your transform, your X, Y, and Z in Unity, whatever the coordinates are, it's this dot here is going to be at that coordinate, and everything else is going to be relative to that. So if we set this object at 0, 0, 0 in Unity, then it will hang down like this, which is fantastic. So that's what we're looking for over here. Whereas so now we are not in edit mode, right? Type tab, I'm in edit mode, you can see down here. Tab again, I'm in object mode. If I were to hit G to grab and move this now, I'm moving the origin of the object, which isn't what I want to do. So I'm just using Control Z to undo that. Okay, so I've got that. Now, I am in object mode, not edit mode. So I'm going to hit Control A, and I'm going to add a cube at this point. Now, of course, it is going to spawn over there, which isn't what I want. There's a couple of things. I could have moved a 3D cursor back over here. It's worth noting, at any point, you can hit space, and you get this little search over here, and you can do something like, how can I move my cursor? Oh, set 3D cursor. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. Cursor. Snap cursor to center right over there. So I put it back in the original position, and that would let me add objects there. That's one way of doing it. The other thing is, once you do spawn an object, you can go into the object mode over here and change its location. So this existing cube, I can say, listen, go back to 0, 0, 0. And that's what we want. For this cube, we want its location to be 0, 0, 0. And then what I want to do is I want to go into edit mode by hitting tab, and then I want to make changes to it here. So scale it down. And the idea being, when this object is at 0, 0, 0, I want its bottom to be flush like that. Okay? I want it to be nicely sitting right on the hex over here when both of these are at 0, 0, 0. All right, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to make this guy into sort of like a unit. This is going to be our meeple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the 3 key on my numpad to go into the side view. I'm going to hit S for scale. Okay, S for scale. But what I'm going to do is now I'm going to hit Y to only scale along the Y-axis. And in Unity, or sorry, in Blender, the Y-axis is basically your depth. So I'm going to put it to somewhere around there. To me, that looks pretty okay. So I'm going to do that. What else am I going to do is I'm going to add so while I'm in edit mode, I'm going to hit Shift A. Notice I can add another mesh. I don't get all the options. I'm editing a mesh, so all I can do is add another mesh to this. I'm going to add a cylinder. This time I'm going to give it more vertices, probably 12. 12 should look roundish. Yeah, that looks roundish. I like that. So I'm going to do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to the side view. I'm going to hit R to rotate. And then I'm going to type in 90 to rotate it 90 degrees. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it. I'm just going to scale it. I mean, really what I'm concerned with here is scaling it in the Y direction to try to get the thicknesses to more or less match. Mostly eyeballing it. You could do with more precision, but I think we're going to be okay here. I'm going to hit the 1 key on the numpad to go back to the front. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this object. I'm going to hit Z to only move it upwards. Actually, I'm going to need to do some more scaling. I want it. This is going to be the head of our little meeple. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit S again to scale, but this is very important. I do not want it to scale in the Y direction, which again is our sort of thickness, because I set the thickness to be correct. And right now it would change in every single direction. So you can scale in one direction by hitting a key. Like I could hit Z and then it would only scale in the Z axis. But if I hit Shift Y, then it will only scale in every axis direction except Y. So I think I'm going to make the head of our meeple something like that. I think that's going to be okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit G from the grab or move, then Z to only move vertically. And what I'm going to try to do is line up There we go. This vertice here to be flush over there. Okay, now it's worth noting that this is all one mesh at this point. If I tab out, so I'm in object mode, and I hit A to deselect everything, right? Oops. It's all right. I deselect everything. If I right click on this object, this is all one object, one mesh. It happens to not be a mesh that's literally connected, but that's okay. It's going to be fine. So I'm going to hit tab again to go into the edit mode. Again, if I select all, it's going to select all the vertices from both parts, and that's okay. But what I want to do at this point is I just want to select this object down here. Okay, this object here. So how are we going to do that? If I were to, there's another way to select all connected. There's a way to select everything connected to this. I thought, oh, is it L? Aha, it's L. Thank you. So if I have nothing selected and I select one vertice in this object, and then I hit L, not L. I just had it. Select linked. Why did... There you go. Why is it not working when I'm just doing one? I need two of them to be selected? Something's weird's going on. How come it's not working all the time? That's strange. I'm clearly doing something wrong. But yeah, normally when you hit L, it will select everything that is connected to that one vertice. So now we've just got the bottom cube selected, which is great. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to hit Control R. This is a slicing tool. You choose a direction. I'm going to choose there. Now you could move the slice, but I'm just going to hit Escape to not move it. So I have now put a slice in my box in half like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, oops, using the B key, which is your box select tool, I'm going to try to grab all the vertices on the right. Now this will not work the way I want. Notice it didn't grab the ones in the back. The reason for that is by default, when you're in solid view like this, where everything looks like solid cubes, it will not select any vertices that are hidden. So there's two ways to resolve this. One, you could hit this button here, which is limit selection to visible. If we turn this off, you get a little bit of X-ray view, which is cool. And if you box select this way, it will select the things in the back. There's that. Also, if you hit Z, you can toggle into full, just sort of like X-ray mode, and then you'll always be able to select things in the back. And in fact, that button for only showing you the visible goes away. So there's two options. I'm going to go into solid mode like this with the 3D. So what I want to do is I want to grab everything on this side, and I'm going to delete it. And while I'm at it, I'm going to grab everything over here on this side, and I'm going to delete that as well. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is I want to just stitch this up to be a little nicer over here. Now, they're not quite lined up, right? But that's okay. So this vertice, which belongs to the box, and this vertice, which belongs to our circle over here for the head, I'm going to go and grab them. So I'm going to use the B key, box select them both. And then what I'm going to do is merge them, which I believe is Alt-M. But if I don't remember, I can type in merge over here. Yep, Alt-M. I'm going to do that. Then it asks me, so it's going to merge these two vertices, but it wants to know where they should be merged. So I'm going to say, at the center between them both, I kind of want this one to be the master one. So there we go. So what I'm doing, instead of box selecting, right? So I could box select, but instead I'm going to right click the one that belongs to the box. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift right click the one that belongs to the head. Then when I do a merge, I get the option of merging at the position of the first vertice or the last one. I'm going to do the first. There we go. I mean, I could have placed this better, but yeah, it's fine. So I'll do the same thing here. Select the box, select there, Alt-M. I'm going to merge at the first, so at the box. That's going to be fine. Next thing we need to do is we need this to have a face again, because it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'll use the box select tool. I'm going to grab all these. So I've got everything in this sort of C shape over here, down to here. Then I'm going to hit F, which creates a face for us. Excellent. I'm going to do the same thing in the back over there, and then hit F, create a face for us, and hopefully the face in the right direction. We'll find out in a little bit. Okay, so we've got all that stitched up. That's good. We only have half a person, though, right? But that's okay, because what we can do is we can go over here to the wrench button, which is add a modifier. We're going to add a mirror modifier, and we've got the other half there. And why did we do this? It's so that if we make edits to one side, it affects both sides at the same time, which is good and lovely. So what I want to do now, I'm going to go to the front mode. I'm going to hit Control R to do a slice. I'm going to do this sort of horizontal slice like this. Then I'm going to bring it up to around, I don't know, here. There we go, because I want to make an arm. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another slice here, and this is going to be used as the waist. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit G, then X to only move it vertically, or sorry, horizontally. Right, and the other thing is I think I'm going to need to do sort of an armpit over here. Kind of like that. Oh. Let's see. Something like this. And then I think we'll give them legs. So I'll put another slice. This one will be vertical. I will do that. I think that's all right. And then I will bring up this guy to something like that. There we go. Now we have a little person. Easy peasy. Now, one of the things that is a little bit confusing to new people is the fact that if we were to bring this into Unity, it would look not quite right. Basically, by default, it would look like this, okay? Which would be very weird. And the reason for it is there's no way to know if these edges are supposed to be treated as sharp edges or smoothly. And you can actually get a good sense of that. Like in the head, like this, if we want this to look round, right? Think about how this is made. These are truly flat pieces. But we sort of want the side of the head to look round. On the other hand, we want the cut between here to there to look like a sharp angle. We don't want the shader to try to smooth that effect. In fact, in practice, we're going to want sharp angles basically everywhere except for there. So how do we do it? You can set, to a certain extent, you can do sort of individual sort of sharp versus smooth edges. Now, in Unity, I can change the smoothing. Or sorry, in Blender, I can change the smoothing over here. But this will not carry over into Unity the way that you want, because in Unity, it actually has to have a break in the mesh almost, effectively, to make a smooth corner because of the way that the shader information works. So what we'd have to do is actually separate the mesh of this. That's way too much work and kind of silly to do manually. So the solution is this. Set smooth shading as the default, but then add a modifier, this has to come after your mirror, called edge split. And what this will do, it has a degree here, an angle. Anything that's sharper than that angle, it will put a split in that edge, which will work in Unity. Alternatively, in Unity, when you import a file, actually, let's go ahead and save that. Notice I have not done any changes to the bottom part. So the bottom part of this hex, this is the meeple and hex. We're just going to save over that because it was a blank file. The bottom part over here hasn't been given an edge split. As a result, it will likely look a little funny when we bring it into Unity. So we're going to do that. It's going to import our model, which is over here. I'm going to drag the model into Unity. And actually, it does look fine. It must have a default import setting that's correct. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But look how like this kind of looks round, smooth shaded over here. I mean, if you look straight from the front, then we'll still see the, we'll still see the angles. But here it's smooth and you're not getting that sort of sharp chiseled edge, which is okay. I mean, we could make it even smoother if we use more vertices over here, but this is going to be pretty okay. The other thing I realized is I probably should have connected the head slightly differently because it doesn't make sense. Like if this was a wooden shape, obviously that wouldn't work, but I think that's going to be good enough for our purposes. Let's take a look at the import settings of this model and you'll see what I'm talking about here. Yeah. Normals and tangent. I guess that's interesting that it was sharp. And maybe by default it's sharp and it splits it all. Maybe the importer's gotten better. For the sake of argument, I'm going to say shade that smooth and then put in the edge split because that's just the better normal way to do it. But there we go. All right, good. That looks excellent. Last thing we have to do is make a little bit of CD. It's possible the meeple should be smaller. It could be. Now, we've got two options for scaling this. We could scale this in object mode like this, or we could tab, select everything, and scale it over here. There's sort of pros and cons to doing both ways. One of the things that you have to worry about is if you scale in object mode, it doesn't really apply all the changes to the vertices the way you might expect. I think for us it's going to be fine. I'll show you how to apply those changes. So if we do scale things in object mode, one of the questions is always, how is it going to scale? If we look at this button right over here, pivot for rotation / scaling, you can choose where it's going to scale around. And so if it's scaling sort of not where you want it, then you may want to make a change. But for now, because of the way our origin is set up, it's going to scale there. So that looks okay. What I'm going to do, since we've scaled this, I'm going to apply object transform. Okay? And yeah, the scale. There's other ways to do it too. Is it Alt-S? It's clear scale. Let me just check the object settings over here. Okay, scale is all 1, 1, 1. Because when we change this, if I go to scale this, see how the scale is now, if I get it just right, there. Scale is about 2. It's double size it was before. What we want to make sure is we don't want the scale number to be like that. We want to end up with a scale that says 1. So if you change the scale, then what you can do... Okay, that's not what I want. Scale it up. Then, yeah, apply the object transform, apply the scale. Notice now the size of the object didn't change, but now it says scale 1. So this is the new scale of 1, which I think we're going to be happy with. All right, so we're going to do that. Next thing I'm going to do is build a little city or a little castle. And I'm going to build it in the same place just so that our little locations work out. So this has gone on a little longer than I wanted already because I want to do some other setup in the game world. That's okay. So we are with nothing selected. We are in object mode. So I'm going to add a new, I'm going to start with a cube. Yes. Now this cube's in the wrong location, so I'm just going to zero it out. You could also do the clear location. If I do this and then hit Alt-G, it'll also set the location to 0, which is okay. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to scale this to be to place where it fits into the hex nicely, which looks good. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the bottom of this and just sort of bring it up here. Again, I'm sort of eyeballing things, but I think that's okay. We're going to do that. And these are going to be sort of my castle walls, like this. I'm trying to decide if I should make it hollow in the middle. Probably. So what I'm going to do for that, this is one of my favorite tricks. I'm going to grab everything at the top. I'm going to hit E to extrude, but I'm going to hit escape to keep it in the same location. Then I'm going to hit S to scale, and just bring that down like that. And then what I'm going to do is, I'll scale it down a little bit more. Then I'm going to extrude again and bring it downwards. Boop. So now we actually have a box with technically a bottom, but I think that's going to be just fine. Okay, so those are our walls. Now I'm going to stay in object or in edit mode over here. So within the same mesh, I'm going to hit Control A to add a cylinder. I'll leave 12 sides. It's going to be fine. I don't know what the radius and depth is going to be. And I could have positioned it a little bit better to start off with. Let me undo. Let me grab. So what I'm doing is I'm right-clicking this point right over here. And then what I'm going to do is the cursor. I'm going to snap the cursor to active. So now my 3D cursor, where all the objects spawn, is set to that vertice. So now when I go and add in a cylinder, it's going to be centered over there. So I'm not going to mess with the size. I'm just going to scale it down this way. So I want the tower to be just like that. Yeah, that overlaps the tile a little bit. You know what? I'm going to change my mind. Undo, undo. I'm going to select this vertice instead. Snap cursor to active. Or you know what? I'm going to grab this whole group of cursors, of vertices, and then snap cursor to selected, which I think will put it in the middle. There we go. So it'll put it in the middle of everything I've selected, including vertically, but that's okay. So now if we do this and we drop a cylinder in there, and maybe I will tune the radius this way to feel a little bit better. There we go. Something like that looks good. And the depth we can go and increase. I think it's okay that it pokes downwards. There you go. Poke up like that. That's going to be okay. Because then with these numbers locked in, what I can do is repeat the process. Go here, snap cursor to selected, add a cylinder, and it'll remember my numbers. So I'm just going to do that. I mean, whoops. We could have just done a lot of mirroring, but this is going to be fine. So we need to snap cursor to selected, add a cylinder. There we go. I'm going to call that good enough. We could put extra little tower bits and things like that, but you know, I want to move on, so that's okay. I'm going to set the smoothing to the shading to smooth, and then I will go ahead and add the edge split modifier over here. There we go. So these look nice and round. I like it. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and save that. We're going to go back into Unity over here, and there we go. So if I were to drag the entire meeple and hex object, which I just made, into the Unity space, then I get this. In practice, we won't be doing that. What I'll be doing instead is, oh, I never named my objects. Hold on. Let's do that. Let's click you. We're going to name you in object mode here. You're going to be Meeple. Excellent. And then I'm going to right click on the castle and call you castle. Then I'm going to right click on the tile, the hex, and I'm going to call you hex. We're going to save that. Go back into the unities. There we go. My objects are called a little bit better. So now I'm going to drop these into the world. Oops, I didn't want to drop everyone. I want to. Oh, when you drop, it'll drop the whole object. After you do that, you can take these guys, remove them from my parent. Yes, that will break the reference to the prefab, but that's okay. And then, so now I have a castle, a hex, and a meeple that is disconnected from another. I can say create a folder, call it, say, prefabs. And then we're going to take these guys and move them into the prefabs folder like that. Now, oh, hold on. We're not going to do that because as we know, you never want a object that has a model, right? This is a model. You never want that naked on the root of your object. Why are these red? It's because the prefab that they were connected to is gone, but that's okay. You never want that as the root because if ever you want to replace the graphics, it becomes kind of annoying to do. Also, because we are importing from Blender, which has a different coordinate system than Unity. This is not always a problem depending on what modeling software you use. Because it has a different coordinate system than Unity, it has this 90-degree rotation here all the time, which can get kind of awkward. So it's much, much, much better if what we were to do is we were to create an empty, okay? We do have to make sure it's at 0, 0, 0 in here. So that it's nicely centered, right? Just like everything else. One trick that I like to use, if you've positioned something and you're happy with the position and you're like, oh, but I got to put an empty. I got to put it in empty. How do I get the coordinates to work out? Right click on, say, the object itself, create an empty within it as a child, then go and move the child to the root, and then move that graphic inside of there. So I can call this something like castle. So castle, castle, that's okay. And we'd make the prefab out of this. And the advantages that are, whoa, no, I fucked that up because of the rotation was inherited. Hang on, hang on. Let me try this again. Get rid of the empty, get rid of this. I guess what I have to do after all in this scenario is make my game object first. Make sure it's at 0, 0, 0 with no rotation, and then put the castle inside of that. Because again, the castle object will have that 90-degree rotation that we don't like, but the parent game object will not. And therefore, it makes it way easier to work with. So we're going to go ahead and do that. My bad for doing that in kind of an awkward order over here. So that's going to be okay. So we have a prefab for the castle. I'm going to remove you. Again, I'll create an empty over here. It'd be better if I had reset my view so that I guess I could have double-clicked on something that was centered and that would have been okay. We're going to put the meeple in here. Meeple. And then prefab that. And then get rid of this. So yeah, if you double-click on an object that's 0, 0, 0, it sort of sets the focus of your scene editor camera to 0, 0, 0, which means now if we create an empty, not quite. It's too bad. Almost 0, 0, 0. So we'll do that and call the base object hex. And there we go and do that. So again, the advantage of this is at some point, if you come up with, say, a completely different castle graphic, but your castle object might have had a bunch of components added to it, and then you want to change the castle graphic, it's okay. You can just delete this and drop a new one in, and it's super more convenient to work with. We need a scene, sure. Call it that, as I normally do. So we'll put these, actually, let's put the hex in. And what we're going to do is we're going to very, very quickly, because this has gone on longer than I'd hoped for, we're going to very quickly start to build just a little view around here. So I'm going to hit Control-D to duplicate this. And the question is, how much do we have to go over in positive X to place this thing? And it's going to be a different number than you might expect, right? Because if I take this and I duplicate it, we've done a hex tutorial here. I'm not going to go into full hex placement stuff. We're just going to hand place a few things. If we go this way, it's basically going to be 1 because we set our radius to be, well, 0.5. So the whole diameter of this is 1. So they go 1 this way. But that's clearly, that's not, that's not actually that helpful, right? That's not working out because the next one would be over here. So there is sort of a consistent number ratio that once you place it, depending on your initial size, well, I mean, you could calculate with angles and stuff. I mean, this is definitely going to be a x of 0.5. Sorry. No, not even that way. That's right, yeah. So we've done it before where we've sort of, I think we mostly eyeballed it, but of course you can use math. So if that's 0.44, that means that this one will be 0.88 off in the x direction. So at least we can get that to be consistent between these objects. Although I think this here needs to be just a little, whoa, just a tiny bit, not even close to that. 4, 5, 6. How does that look? The new thicker lines, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. And then once you have it, you can sort of like duplicate all of this. And then you can't really use the inspector to place things like you might want. But so we'll just keep eyeballing it. And for this, it's going to be perfectly fine. I guess maybe what I should have done is actually moved it here. Yeah, that'll be easier to keep placing this. Like that. A little close. Good enough. Oh, I am apparently duplicating some lights. So let me actually get rid of the lights from the scene first of all. And we are going to grab this whole set. I guess I could have just picked from the inspector as well. We'll put the light back in a second. I'm going to duplicate everything and position it over here. And that's, I'm going to say that's going to be enough hexes for what we're trying to do here. So just eyeballing it, that's going to be okay. We really, I just wanted somewhere visual for my stuff to sit. Well, it kind of looks like a spaceship. You know, people are always making spaceship things with cubes, but why not hexes? There you go. That's a project I'm leaving for you guys, because wouldn't that look kind of badass as sort of a spaceship? Okay. So we got that. I'm going to take this light and move it way out of the way because it annoys me. It's a directional light, so it doesn't actually matter where in the world it is. So there we go. Just get it out of the way. And that's okay. So then we've got that, which is good. We're going to drop a castle sort of there. We're just going to make sure that its Y is set to 0, which should line up very nicely. And I guess, what hex is this? It's hex 4. So if I put the castle, say, inside of hex 4 for now, and then set it to be 0, 0 within that hex, then it'll be nicely centered over here. Everything being white does not make our life very easy. Also, do we not get shadows in this directional light by default? Oh, let's get some soft shadows going on. There we go. So now we can actually see things from the top. You know what? Maybe we'll just use hard shadows. Oh, that's so ugly. Soft shadows. This is one area where the light distance actually can sort of matter for some of the resolution. Our objects are pretty small, so we might be tempted to change the bias a little bit. I think we're fine. We'll just leave it as is. We're going to be okay. All right, so we've got that, and then what we want to do is we want to put our meeple somewhere, say over here. So that's hex number 1. So I'll just drop the meeple inside of hex 1, verify that it's at 0, 0, 0, which is good because then it's aligned perfectly on the base. And there we are. What we might be tempted to do here is I'm going to go and create a folder for materials. Bam, like this. And we are going to create one. So this is going to be hex. I'll just literally call these what they are. Meeple. Actually, it'll be more like, this is just going to be a wood brown. So I'll make the meeple and the building the same color, sort of a brownish kind of color. Sure, that's going to be okay. So we're going to apply this to the castle object and to the meeple object. Yeah, that's fine. And then for the hex, I was going to maybe do it sort of grassy green. I think it'd have to be mostly diffused, though. Something like that, I suspect. We'll make sure to change the prefab. Actually, well, here we just made some changes to these objects. We're going to apply the meeple and here, but then I'm just going to go to the hex prefab over here. The mesh renderer, the material, I'm going to make sure to tell it that it's going to use the hex color, so it'll do everything. Do we want a darker green? There we go. Something like that. All right, so we have just a little something to look at when we do our testing. We're not doing an actual like Civ-style game or anything like that, but we're gonna have some context for what's going on. And this was what I was gonna set up sort of beforehand, just so that we have this pretty little thing. Let's add some stuff to it. But I knew some people would be interested in the little Blender workflow, so there's that. Very simple modeling, but hey, if you're ever doing game jams and stuff, this works out really well. And honestly, with just a little bit more loving and a little bit more details here and there, this is so not a bad base for a game. I think the castle would have to look better. Maybe do a different way with the town as well, little huts or things like that. Maybe you do something where the sort of castle keep was quite smaller, like over here, and then outside of it you had a few like little buildings, little village huts and things like that. All of a sudden, how looks pretty good, you know? It's kind of cool. And I like the sort of physicalness of this sort of board game kind of look. I think it's kind of, I don't know, funky cool, especially with the shadows. So, all right, we're going to wrap this up here, and next episode we are going to actually implement some of the user interface and alert system, which is what I talked about is actually the point of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Thank you, all our March Patreon supporters and these mic check supporters. We've got Yukofin, Snoopy TRB, Pavel Zdanov, Drazion, Gavin Power, Jan Torre Vel, Michael McClintock, Aaron Doibson, Craig Mortel, The Not So Evil Engineer, Julian Ogelafon, Maris Fieldvold, Speedy Savant, Steven Stager, Valiant, that's probably Stager, I don't know, Valiant Cake Fiend, Jason Yanity, Stephen Bonnerman, Kale the Quick, Neil Blakely, Milner, and everyone who has watched, shared, favorited, and subscribed. Thank you so, so much.